I'm Harry Sefarbi, and all of these paintings that you see are my paintings. I teach at the Barnes Foundation in Marion, Pennsylvania. And the Barnes Foundation is an art school. It's not a gallery or a museum, which is the kind of reputation that it has. It was founded as a school. What I do is I teach people to see paintings. Now, there's a difference between looking and seeing. Everybody looks at paintings when they go to a museum or gallery, but not everybody sees what the painting is about. When I use the word teach them to see, I really mean perceive. In other words, they have to come to a canvas and try to perceive what's significant about it. That's a kind of process that you bring to bear on the paintings, meanings that you have from past experience, either in painting or in your life, right? And then the painting works back on you because there will be things there that you don't have. And this interacting between you and it is really what constitutes an experience. What I do is I start with plastic form. It's a concept of plastic form. I know it sounds esoteric, but really isn't. Plastic form means that it results from the way the artist uses color, light, line, space. And as they come together, they create what we call plastic form. And these color, light, line, and space are the means toward arriving at the form. And we call it plastic because the artist can manipulate them. The basic plastic means for an artist is color, just as for a photographer it would be light, or for an architect it's space. You see, it can have line, it can have color, it can have other things, but an architect is interested in space. See, just as a photographer may use color, textures of the paper and things like that, but still it's light that governs what he does, and that's his basic concern. So with an artist, with a painter, the basic concern is color. It's one of the plastic means. And it's plastic because it can be manipulated in many ways. When you look at these paintings, you can see there's a myriad of colors, of tones of color, shades of color, right? And the colors are affected by the very medium that the artist uses. If you paint with oil, it'll have one effect. If you paint with pastel, it'll have a softer effect. If you paint with watercolor, it'll be transparent. And the subjects, whether it's a park scene or an interior scene or whatever it may be, is the starting point. That's what everybody sees. It's the point where the artist and the viewer meet. But then you have to go beyond that to come to the meaning of the painting, which usually lies in the plastic form. It's the way the color, light, line, and space and so on are put together that gives a meaning that the painting will eventually have. Venetian painting, whatever the subject, is going to be golden and rich, and the Florentine, whatever the subject, is going to be more austere, dry. It's painted on plaster very often, which is a kind of drying medium. So that's what I want to say. So the idea is to see past the subject for the attributes. You see? See, I may say in these high chairs that I have here, the color, I paint themes and variations. They always work with the same subject, but the qualities will be different, and the meanings will be different. The idea I wanted to show these babies enthroned. The one on this side, on the right, the color is greens and yellows predominantly, right? And it has almost kind of a satiny effect in the way the light moves across it. Whereas the high chair over here is sort of like a frosted glass or stained glass. That's why I call it chapel child, because it suggests a chapel in a church, for example, with the windows facing onto the subject, whatever it may be. The other one is more, well, the color, if I tell you that it's more Flemish, I don't know whether you're ready for that, but that green gold color is the kind of thing you find in Flemish painting. Line is made of color. The artist dips his brush into a color, and he drags it, or pushes it, or staggers it across the surface, whether it's a canvas or paper. And the mark that it leaves is a line, you see. But the line can be a broad line, as you see around the leg of this dancer. It can be a rather narrow, careful line that outlines the horse. As I was saying, in the green landscape over there, you can find a very broken line. It's sort of hatched and so on. The painting stands on the color, the soft green and soft oranges. It's kind of a bizarre color scheme. When you look at it, you'll see that the greens are kind of superimposed over the oranges, which gives it that effect. But what pulls it together are the lines. And the lines are very delicate, hatching sort of lines that show you the tree or the figure and so on. Another characteristic of line is that it insists that you follow a line. See, that if I do an area, you take that area in, that's black or that's white, but the line has a different character. It's spontaneous, it's been done in a moment, but they express qualities. They express qualities. This has the dancers have a kind of spontaneous, in the moment, offhand, quick, and it has that quality which becomes part of the dancers. The dancers become spontaneous. The horse is more careful. It's really a little bit like a Uccello horse in Florentine painting. Uccello is a very early Florentine painting, almost pre-Florentine. And he does horses in battle and so on. I think I had that in mind when I did this. The Boy on a Horse is really a portrait I did of, it's a painting I did from a portrait of myself at about 6 years old. See? And I worked on it a lot. And then at some point I realized I wanted it to be tight. Perhaps I was teaching Uccello and I made this line and that's what I wanted, there I have it. With color you can make space. If you take two colors and hold one next to the other, one will come forward and one will go back. That's why if you run out of paint and you try to match it, you may get the right color, but the relationship has changed and it's not in the same place. You have to repaint the whole thing, see? That's why you have to mix enough color to start, which I very often don't do. And then I change the whole thing. Nobody, it's my painting after all. Okay, so with color you can create space, and it comes about as a relationship of the colors. If you look at the two paintings with houses, and one is a white house, and one is more of a grayish house, let's say. Well, the white house comes forward, and the figures go back, and the relationship of the colors bring that forward. Whereas the other one, it's more pervasive. It doesn't have that forcefulness. If you look at the reclining poet, I think it's called Poet at Rest in the show, there you are, he is in a landscape, and there are broad areas of color. Well, you start in the front, which is sort of, you can start. Nobody can tell you where to start, but you could start in the front, which I think of as a sort of a road. Then you see him reclining on a grassy knoll. Then beyond him, you see in the distance what might be a park or a forest. Then you see a distant tree, and then you see the sky. It's all done with color. There's no perspective lines there, no vanishing points, none of the traditional ways to make space. It's really the relationships of the color. And a lot of that, working on that painting, was making those relationships. I want one to go back and one to come forward. And it's trial and error. And then, of course, light becomes another means that's created with the color light. For example, and it's also, and key, when you talk about key in painting, it means if it's dark, it's low key. If it's light, it's high key. It's almost like in relation to the sun. Very often at school, when we were children, we'd make these charts, which would gradually go from light to very dark. That's what I mean with key. And so that when you use light, very often, it's the contrast. In that little high chair, I have the mother or the donor or whatever who is in another room, for example. And it's done because of the contrast of the light. See, you can't paint light. There's no bottle of light. It's all done with relationships, where it will go and where it will stand. Right. The light can be transparent. In Chapel Child, it's a transparent light. It's not glazed. Glazed light is a wash of color. This is more, it's almost a scumble. I painted these panes of glass, blue, green, and then scraped away to let the light come through, which gives it that frosted look. The title is really, as I said before, it's the point where the viewer and the painter meet. It's a way of identifying it. My name is Harry. Well, that's all you'll know who Harry is, that I'm not Tom or Dick when I come in the room. But that doesn't tell you anything about Harry, you know. I have to say I'm a painter. Then suddenly Harry takes on meaning. I've been drawing and scribbling all the time when I was a child. But then I learned about the Barnes Foundation, and that made all the difference. It was heaven in a way. They talked about creativity and what it meant and tried to demonstrate it in paintings. What artists had found significant and expressed it in the painting. And all this was just, it was intoxicating. And here they were by the dozens of Renoir, dozens of Matisse, dozens of Sefarbi. And then they would talk about them, you know, and try to understand it. And then I want to mention Violet de Mazia, who was the first-year teacher, who was famous in her day. She was a very charismatic person. The way she dressed, the way she talked about paintings with her hands and so on. And she was a brilliant teacher. She had the ability to take from you what you knew and what you had brought, and to supply you what you didn't know. And then you see this picture open up. You see, something very nice happened to me. One of my paintings that I had used to compete for a Crescent was accepted at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts annual. This was a show, they don't have it anymore. It was really a national show, really a very important show that was held every year, and all the painters from New York and so on would exhibit there. And it was the ambition of everybody to get in that show. Well, I got in that show with one of the paintings that I couldn't get past the jury at the Academy. Well, that just firmed up my resolve to go abroad and keep painting, and it was a thrill. Well, to make a long story short, Dr. Barnes came to see that show, and he eventually bought that painting, and that painting that couldn't make it at the Academy has been hanging at the Barnes Foundation to this day. My adventures were really adventures in art. One of these adventures that I brought back was accepted almost right away at a show, kind of Philadelphia show at the Art Alliance. And Miss de Mazia went to see the show. She saw the painting. She bought the painting. She owns the painting. Well, it was like Barnes buying a painting, de Mazia buying a painting. It was like being touched by God, you know, because I had so much respect for them, and I owed them so much for what I had learned and the direction that my life took, you see, that they would buy one of my paintings was really, you know, they were people of strong judgment, strong opinions. I think I ought to say a word about what traditions are. Tradition is a way of seeing. Oh, it's a way of perceiving. One of the examples I use, like, we drink coffee and France drinks, and Europe drinks coffee. Our coffee is sort of a long drink and a mild drink, a flavored drink and a hot drink, and coffee, and then you eat with it and so on. Whereas in France and Italy and Spain, in my experience, coffee is almost another course. It's after you have your meal, then you have coffee, and it's an espresso, very strong, cuts through all the cheese and oil and so on. Well, that's a tradition. That's how they see coffee. Like the Venetian tradition, they see the world brown, gold, low-key, atmospheric.